This is part 2 of Normandy beach analysis. My screencast software only allows me to record 15 minutes, so I met that time period. So I'm just picking back up. We were talking about Powell's voice and his attitude. We were talking about that short, those clipped wording phrases that Powell is using. And we were talking about the fact that he used those things was a stylistic move to help him to give us a sense of to get a particular effect out of his reader. And so the fact that he's not using, he's understating a lot of these items. He's not using very many adjectives and adverbs, and is only describing certain things in more clear detail, gives us the effect that he is covering or trying to contain his sorrow at what he's witnessing. A good test for economy in your own paper is to put your finger on any spot in the page and see if you can figure out the purpose for whatever word or phrase that you're happen to touch. So, in this essay, if I touch pocketbooks, metal mirrors, extra trousers, and bloody abandoned shoes, if I touch that in trying to figure out their purpose, these details are personal belongings that people wouldn't normally leave behind. You're not going to leave your purse, if you're a woman, or your wallet if you're a man, behind. Extra trousers, having that extra set of clothing, and you wouldn't normally leave behind your shoes. And it tells us that they're not extra shoes, they're abandoned shoes, and they're bloody, so they've been on the feet of the men that they belong to. They're relics. They bear witness to the young men that were killed in battle. If you touch the detail about letters that would fill those blank abandoned pages, all those pages that are floating around, you realize that the missing soldiers were not just isolated individuals. They're human. They have families behind, and these families are waiting behind at home, praying and hoping that they're going to hear from them. There are lots of other things around the beach, still talking about economy, that Powell could have described. The water, he could have talked about the water being in a long description of rolling in white caps and glassy pools between the sandbars. All these things that he could have included, but he chose not to describe these things because even though they're beautiful, they wouldn't have helped us see the scene as Powell wants us to see it. Those beautiful things would have detracted from the stark horror of what's left behind on this beach. What's left, this final draft, is that that jigsaw puzzle that we talked about. Every piece fits tightly together. And if he would have left out any one of any of these details, the picture would just not have come together the way that it did. Now, that runs through the 7 moves, but often there are moves within the moves that he makes that sometimes don't fit into category. So the dominant mode of this essay is description, but if you look closely, it's also very much a narrative. We'll write a narrative essay a little bit later. We are walking the beach with him, observing the things that he observed in chronological order, organized in a period of time, but also within the scope of spatial, like he's witnessing things. He also uses some order of importance. He saves that one powerful statement for the end. He uses comparison, cause and effect, and exemplification also within the structure of description, which are all essay forms on their own that we'll talk about later in the semester. Okay, so Journal 2, I want you to go back to your list of objects that you associated with a person or a place from Journal 1. I'd ask you to make a bullet list of items, objects that you associate with a person or a place that is important to you. And I want you to take your list and I want you to focus your attention on the 3 most meaningful objects on your list. What has the most meaning? What has the most powerful imagery? What do you feel like you can develop fully and describe? And I want you to cull out all the rest, strike through them on your sheet. Once you have those 3 strong objects, I want you to begin to think about how you can include sensory details using your 5 senses in your description. So I want you to make an attempt to use at least one sensory detail to describe each of your 3 objects. The 5 senses are connected really strongly to your memory. And so I want you to think about that packs a more powerful punch for your reader if you can connect a sensory image in some way to this memory that you're writing about. So to give you an example, I went back to my journal about my grandmother. And I decided of the 3 objects on my list that were most meaningful to me and best represented her were the cookbook, the sewing drawer, and the labels on the objects. And now I'm going to figure out how to take those objects and make them mean something to my reader. So here's my read tool. And I'm going to add in some sensory details to my description, and I just chose the cookbook to start with. So high on the kitchen shelf sits the lemon yellow Calling All Cooks, my grandmother's favorite cookbook. It's been sitting there since 1982, the year I was born. Everything in my grandmother's house smells faintly of cinnamon and Jergens lotion, original cherry almond scent. So the old cookbook is no exception. The pages, dog-eared and worn, bear carefully handwritten adjustments to her favorite recipe and the faint stains from drips of this sauce or another that were hastily scrubbed away. So I've taken that cookbook and I've pushed it beyond something that is just an ordinary cookbook that she liked to use. I've now connected a smell, my grandmother's smell, her lotion that she has used my whole life. She still smells like it today. And so I've connected a scent with it. I've connected a site with it. You have the pages themselves. I talk about them being dog-eared and worn, and that handwritten notes that she's written in her recipes, and the stains that she's used that cookbook so much that she's dripped this sauce or that sauce on it, and tried to scrub them away. So I want you to take your journal now, and I want you to see if you can add some sensory details and try one object to start with. Develop out one of your objects more fully, adding some details and especially attempting to add some sensory details as well. And we'll pick back up there in our next lecture coming soon.